For further analysis on the situation in Lebanon, we are now joined from Hong Kong by the expert of the Department of Geopolitical Analysis, Marvin Lee. Welcome. Now, obviously, there has been talks in the international community on the situation in Lebanon and the escalating tensions. We have seen this on the table during the BRICS summit in the past few days. We've seen this in the international conference in Paris. Now, how can these talks and conversations actually impact what's happening in Lebanon and the rising tensions right now?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hi, my name is Marvin, and so there is an ongoing summit in Russia right now. So there is a very important role here. There is China, and China has been playing an international role as an international mediator. And bear in mind about this because, for example, China has successfully mediated tensions between Saudi Arabia and Iran 2 years ago, and also achieved a Palestinian reconciliation statement in 2024. So that's why it is a very a bright future to stop the conflict. However, if you see the head of statement in Kazan summit, you can see that there are lots of superficial statements here. So how can we really solve the how can we really solve the conflict? I think it is a very tricky questions.
Now, we've seen also statements from foreign ministers, the foreign minister actually of in European countries. We've seen the French president saying that in statements that there's going to be international aid and humanitarian aid towards Lebanon. Also, we've seen this from Germany. We've seen statements about humanitarian aid and fund for the Lebanese people. Do you think that in light of what's going on, do you think all these talks and all these statements can actually implement any kind of ceasefire during the coming days?
First of all, this is yes and no at the same time as well. In my opinion, this is a proxy war during this Cold War 2.0, and this is actually a contestation between the BRICS and the Western world. And you can see that they have a joint statement to stop ceasefire, and the European Union and the G7 has been providing the aid. But I don't think this will stop the war immediately, because we have to think about this. Every nation, they are pursuing their own national interests rather than really stop the war.
We're also shedding light on the 11th tour of the foreign minister of the United States, or the State Department and the Secretary of State of the United States. He's been talking about a plan for a ceasefire. He's been trying to affect what's going on in the region. He's been trying numerously throughout his 11th tour to bring people together. That's based on what he said just recently with the foreign minister of Qatar in a press conference. What do you think of the U.S. efforts and the State Department's efforts during this tour, and how can they actually bring results to what can be the last resort of the Biden administration?
First of all, we have to think of the ongoing election in the United States of America. I think this will impact a lot to the ongoing conflict in Lebanon and Gaza. And there are lots of political uncertainty here, like regardless of international relations and the domestic political side in America or in Lebanon. So I think it is really a tall order to have a conclusion to say about this.
But do you think there's going to be any kind of impact from this 11th and probably his final tour before the U.S. elections?
In my opinion, I think China has been making it a possible deal to mediate between both sides. Because if you can see the recent history, China has been playing a very important role to mediate the conflict in Middle East, especially Saudi and Iran. And I think the Chinese diplomat, the Chinese government is doing the same to stop the ceasefire. I think it will be very soon. Because if you read the Chinese history and the philosophy, the Chinese people and the government, they love peace rather than conflict. So from my opinion, I don't think the US government can have the real power to stop the ceasefire, even though Mr. Donald Trump has claimed that he has the right and power to stop all the war in Ukraine and Gaza within 24 hours. I think it's too optimistic.
Finally, there were some matters also on the table of the BRICS summit regarding the power and the international power, and the balance of power that has been probably reflected in the region. What do you think of this conversation? And do you think the map of the balance of power could change, perhaps after what's happening in the region, the escalating tensions?
In the long term, yes. BRICS, there is China, Russia, India, South Africa, and even UAE. And there are lots of countries, they have the intention to apply for BRICS. And I believe that the balance of power will change in the long term. But I can see it won't change a lot in the very short term. But China is playing a peaceful diplomacy right now, rather than using military means to solve the conflict. So I think like the balance of power will slide towards to the Chinese side in the long term, because Chinese government is playing a long-term strategy to win friends and mind and heart rather than make enemies all around the world.
Thank you very much. That was Marvin Lee, our geopolitical analyst. Thank you very much for your valuable insights.